In this video, we're going to talk about the recent NAR settlement and what that means for how buyers work with their agents and how the buyer's agents get paid. This is an important thing happening in the real estate industry and a subject of much discussion. And you may be wondering, well, what does this actually mean to me as a buyer or a seller? So that's what we're going to go through here. Hi, I'm Erin Johnson, Outstanding Ohio's most resourceful realtor with a passion for helping people buy and sell houses in Northeast Ohio. Okay, so let's dive into it a little bit. NAR, which is the National Association of Realtors, they recently reached a settlement with the Department of Justice, or the DOJ, regarding certain rules and practices that were alleged to be anti-competitive and inflated commission costs for home sellers. So that was the lawsuit, was that this was inflating costs for the home sellers and causing some kind of anti-competitive environment. And so the settlement aims to increase the transparency around our pay and promoting competition in the real estate industry. Okay, so that's kind of the high level piece of it. There's two key things that came out of the settlement that are going to change the way we do business. And the first is that agents are going to no longer be able to communicate offers of compensation in the MLS, which is the multiple listing service, which is where we put our listings and the homes available for sale. And that MLS feeds all the other websites where you may be searching for homes. Okay. The second is that agents are going to be required to have a buyer agency agreement signed by their buyers. Okay. I'm going to go into more details on both of those. But before we dive into that, it's best to understand, let's take a moment to understand how it works today, because I think a lot of buyers and sellers don't understand how it works today, which I think is a part of why there was a lawsuit to begin with. So today, sellers are meeting with an agent, so that's the listing agent, and in that conversation and process of signing that contract, they're agreeing on a total commission and that the seller's agent's getting paid, and then the seller agent is offering a portion of that commission, could be half but doesn't have to be, a portion of that commission to the buyer's agent. So that's the buyer's agent offer of compensation, and that amount is getting communicated in the MLS. So that is how I know today as a buyer's agent, if I show you this house, how much I'm going to get paid. And that was agreed to between the seller and the seller's agent. So the buyer doesn't really know what their agent is getting paid. They're probably only paying maybe a transaction fee at closing, and they're not even aware of all of this happening for the most part. And then when it comes to the representation agreement, there's a lot of agents that don't have their buyers sign them. So some agents today are signing them, but a lot aren't signing like an exclusive agency agreement or even a non-exclusive agreement saying that, we're committed to working with each other. So so that's kind of the status of today, right? The seller's meeting with the seller's agent, they agree on an amount, a portion of that gets offered out to the buyer's agent, communicated via the MLS, and you may or may not be signing something with the buyer's agent that you're working with. Okay. So here with these changes that are going to be taking effect August 17th of 2024, we're no longer going to be able to offer that compensation to the buyer's agent via the MLS. Okay, here's the big asterisk note with that, is that that's not saying that the seller cannot offer to pay the buyer's agent compensation. They just cannot communicate it via the MLS. What does that mean? We're going to find out, right? What other ways are they going to come up with to possibly communicate it if this is something they still would like to do to sell their house? So maybe they put it on the sign, maybe they put it on a different website, maybe they put a note on the counter when you go to show the house. Maybe we have to call the listing agent to ask. But they could still offer it. They're just prohibited from communicating that via the MLS. And then regarding the written buyer representation agreement, buyers are going to be required to enter into an agreement and have something signed before they can tour a home that is listed in the MLS. So if you call me up and you want me to show you a house, I cannot show you that house until we enter into an agreement with each other. And that agreement is going to include how much I get paid if you buy that house, or any house, depending on what the agreement is for. And it's going to include a length of time and what type of agreement are we entering into. So it could be an exclusive arrangement where I'm your only agent. Maybe it's non-exclusive. It could be an arrangement that I'm your agent just for that one house, or maybe just for that one day, or it could be more than that. But if you call me up out of the blue and say, oh my gosh, I found this house, I want you to go show it to me, time out, we got to sign this agreement first. Okay, so that is going to impact. There are a lot of agents that run around and get the phone calls and go show houses. I typically like to do the buyer consultation first and have my agent sign that. So that's already how I've been managing my business. But because it's really important to have those conversations up front about what's happening in the market, what to expect in the process, and so forth. And if we decide to work together, if I'm going to commit to you, I want you to commit to me. And that's what this buyer agreement does, is it gives us some level of commitment, because I don't get paid until you buy the house. So I want to know you are committing to working with me. But the other piece of it that's a little bit more new is, okay, we're also agreeing to how much I'm going to get compensated out of this transaction. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have to pay for it directly, which we're going to go into. But that's what this new arrangement with, we have to have this written agreement in place before we show you any houses. So this is bringing that negotiation now between the buyer and the buyer's agent, and it's totally separate from the seller and the seller's agent. So that's the transparency and the new piece of it. Okay, so that's kind of the lay of the land of what's happening, but you may still be wondering, like, gosh, that sounds a little bit different. Like, how is that actually going to work? And does this mean that I'm going to have to pay my buyer's agent directly? And I don't think I'm going to have the money to do that. So I'm going to answer that not necessarily, and probably not likely. Now, here's the thing. There's a lot of speculation about what's going to happen after August 17th in the real estate world, and we don't really know. And it's truthfully probably going to be a lot of different things happening. It could vary by listing. It could vary based on what type of market we're in, if we're in a seller's market or a buyer's market. And it also might kind of adjust over time as we kind of get into a new normal. But with that being said, I think there's really four main paths on how a buyer's agent could be paid in this future state. And the first is basically very similar to today. The seller may still choose to offer buyer's agent compensation because they see the value of compensating a buyer's agent to bring the buyers to their home to help sell their home. And they just cannot communicate that via the MLS. So again, they may choose to, they might put it on the sign, they may put it, on the counter. Their agent may communicate it via phone calls. Like, we're gonna have to figure that out, but it is still an option for the seller to offer to pay the buyer's agent compensation. The second path is that the seller can offer a concession. And basically this happens today with like a carpet allowance is probably the best analogy, is they may say, I'm gonna offer you $2,000 in carpet allowance because I know the carpet's old. I don't want to deal with replacing it. So I'm going to basically give you a credit at closing that gives you money back in your pocket, that you wouldn't have to bring that $2,000 to closing, and now you can go spend the $2,000 on the carpet. So they could offer a seller's concession that you could choose to use to fulfill your obligation to your buyer's agent. They're not allowed to require that that's what it's for, or to specify that that's what it's used for. But if you have signed an agreement that you're going to pay your buyer, X, and they're offering X as a concession, you can use that to fulfill your obligation to your buyer's agent. And they are allowed to communicate concessions via the MLS. Okay, so I know it sounds a little bit semantics, but they cannot offer buyer's broker's compensation via the MLS. They can offer a concession that you could choose to use to pay your agent. The third path is if the seller's not offering upfront some amount, or maybe that amount is not enough to what you agreed to with your buyer's agent, you can put into your offer and make it a contingency, a piece of your offer that the seller is going to contribute towards your closing costs and give you that credit at closing that you can then choose to use to fulfill your obligation to your buyer's agent. So very similar to today, where some buyers are asking for seller paid closing costs as part of their offer so that they have to bring less cash to the closing table, they can loop these buyer agent compensation amounts into the seller paid closing cost request as part of the offer. Okay, so that's path number 3. Path number 4, and I don't think this is going to happen very often, is that the buyer would pay themselves at closing for their agent. And I just think in a lot of cases, because the buyers don't have that kind of cash, that we're really going to see a lot of 1, 2, and 3 happening, which really are just different means to the same end of what's happening today. Like today, it's really getting paid out of the transaction, out of the seller's proceeds. And this path 1, 2, and 3 would still do that. It's just a more transparent way of it happening. It's, the buyer's negotiating with their agent what they think that they're worth, and then they're working together to figure out how to make that happen through the transaction. Okay. So that's really what I think the four main paths are. Now, there is some speculation that this settlement's going to introduce some new, I'll call them business models, that when the free market gets a hold of this, they're going to get creative and they're going to come up with some new things. And it could be things such as like an upfront retainer fee that you pay your agent to use them, and then maybe you pay them, more at closing. Or it could be like a pay for service model where maybe you're paying for each service they provide. They show you a house, you pay them $100. They write an offer, you pay them this amount. They, sit at your inspection, you pay them this amount. So there could be a kind of a la carte menu of the way agents get paid. And so it's kind of it opens it up for us to have more control over how and when we get paid. And we can choose to, negotiate that with our buyers, and whatever we can agree to is what we can do. So there may be some new models and some new options, and we'll see. Time will tell what sticks and what seems to be working. But I really think, at least out of the gate, those four paths are what's going to be most likely going to happen. And then regarding um, the buyers, so the buyers representation agreement, that is what's going to dictate the amount that the agent gets paid. And if the seller's offering to pay more than that, the buyer's agent is not allowed to take the difference. If they are offering to pay less than that, then the buyer's going to have to come up with the difference by either, requesting it via the offer or having some cash. So that's another kind of nuance to the way this is going to work that you should be aware of. Okay, so I know that was a lot, and I hope it helps explain what's happening and what it might mean to you. I know this is confusing and change can be scary, but the biggest takeaway I want you to have is not to be afraid to hire a buyer's agent to represent you. I did a separate video on the 10 reasons why you should hire a buyer's agent. And of course, I'm going to, be a proponent of this because it's my job. But I do think there is a lot of reasons that you should use your own agent to have somebody representing you in your best interests. And as I explained, there's ways we can help you negotiate that it will get paid through the transaction. So you shouldn't be so worried about having this extra cash at closing to pay for your agent. And it's important to have your own representation, somebody looking out for you and your best interest, helping you manage through the process, and particularly in this market where there's multiple offer situations, helping you with a strategy to navigate that and to win the house. So please, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. And this NAR settlement, it represents a significant shift in the real estate industry, and it's undoubtedly going to impact the way buyers work with their agents and the way we get paid. And there's still a lot to come because it hasn't even, it's not even effective yet. But really, I think these changes are going to promote that transparency, competition, and consumer choice. And as the industry adapts to these changes, we need to stay adaptable and aware of it and educated on it so that we can find mutually beneficial arrangements. So I'm committed to doing that, to staying on top of it, to helping educate you to understand what this means for you, and to make sure that we can work together to win and to achieve your objectives. So please, I would love to work with you. If you have any questions about this, feel free to reach out. If you'd like to set up a buyer or seller consultation free of charge, give me a call, 330-227-4355. Thank you so much.